Hello, I'm Howie Shareff, and welcome to another show from You Call This Yoga, an educational nonprofit organization. Our internet TV talk show brings guests from around the country, sometimes out of the country, and locally to you, the viewers and listeners, teachers, aspirants of yoga, and practitioners, to learn more about the threads of yoga that make up this wonderful quilt called yoga. Yoga isn't just a physical practice in the sense of twisting and active movement or about power. It's about engaging elements of our mind, body, and heart through different practices connected by breathing. At least that's my simple interpretation. We're so fortunate in that we can bring guests onto the show who will share some of their patterns and processes in their lives. We have some commercials or pearls of wisdom that will be shared, as well as our sponsor spot. We do invite you to call in with your questions and comments, 919-518-9773. You can log in to the website at Nissan Communications on our You Call This Yoga page and type in a question, or you can engage us by Skype at Computers 2K Voice. Computers 2K Voice. You Call This Yoga is actively involved in the community, bringing programs to the physically challenged and underserved in the Raleigh-Durham area of North Carolina. Feel free to visit our website, youcallthisyoga.org, youcallthisyoga.org, to learn more about our programs, as well as participating with us, as we are a volunteer-based organization. Speaking of a volunteer, we have the luxury of having Nischala Devi on the show today. Nischala was teaching at the Accessible Yoga Conference, and I had the luxury of taking 2 of her classes. They were very inspiring, as I'm more of a physically based practitioner based on my history and illnesses, though that is evolving. And from my experience with her and the people in the class and now beyond, I'm gaining greater insights in how to help me heal as well as others that I come across. Sometimes that could be just keeping my lips together and listening. So I'm going to practice that in a little bit and bring on Nischala Devi and share a little bit about her history and how she just became exposed to a yoga practice, a few years ago. Good morning.
Good morning. Namaste. It's wonderful to see you.
Thank you.
Welcome, everyone. Yes, thank you.
So please tell us about the early days of your yoga practice. What was it like then?
The early days of my yoga practice. Okay. Well, it's probably the tidbit people want to know also is that I started out in Western medicine, and I was a physician's assistant. And then from there, I got a little bit disillusioned with the Western medicine, and it kept growing until I realized I had to find out who I was before I could work with anyone else. And that's how my yoga practice began. I met my guru, Swami Satchidananda, and became very, very involved to the point of becoming a monastic, a monk, for 18 years. Yes. So I really delved deeply into it. And I think that formed a foundation for the rest of my life, because we meditated 3 times a day. We had service to the community. doing our physical practices, eating a very simple, clean, healthy diet. And it really helped me to be able to go on later and teach and share that with other people.
Hmm. Well, I suspect you weren't just walking down the street and Swami Satchidananda bumped into you.
Pretty close to that,
Oh,
actually.
okay. Well, it sounds like a blues song. Can you put that to a blues progression?
Well, yeah, I probably could if I knew how to do that. But actually, what happened was very interesting. I was working in a medical clinic, uh, very long hours. This was in the Mission District in San Francisco, which at that time was, I got a good education, let's put it like that. And I was so exhausted at night, I couldn't actually cook myself dinner. But there was a little cafe 2 blocks away called the Good Karma Cafe.
Mm-hmm.
And I was sitting there one night, and this man was sitting across from me. He said to me, "You look exhausted. You need yoga." And I said, "Well, I don't have time for anything like that." And he said, "2 blocks down is Integral Yoga. You should go there." And sure enough, the next day I got sick and I couldn't go into the clinic to spread the germs. I thought, okay, I'll go and take a class. And that was the beginning. So it wasn't that different than walking down the street. It was just the Good Karma Cafe, which was a little bit, in those days, very interesting place to eat.
I guess
Yes.
it was karmic.
It was karmic. There you go.
Wow. So it was like karma with a side of karma.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that is
It's
fascinating.
pretty much brown rice with a side of karma, but yes. Yeah.
It was
Yeah. But
fascinating.
when you hunger for something in your life, but you don't know what it is, and then you find it and it fills that place in you, you're never hungry again. It's that beautiful. And that's how I felt with yoga and still feel with it. I still
Wow.
feel each day that it's new and brings me to a different place in myself. So that's why I'm so excited about it and sharing it with other people because of that. Yeah.
And it's just an interesting element of self-awareness to notice that you're hungering for something instead of
Yeah.
in a, a, a hamster wheel, in that sense of, oh, I have to keep doing this because this is what I do, as opposed to,
Right.
oh, there must be other
Yes.
channels. All
Other
right.
channels.
So you took your germs and you went to the Integral Yoga Center, and
Yes.
fortunately, no one got sick, but somehow you managed to go back. Uh,
Yes.
and what happened then? I mean, one class is a start, but
Right.
how did it fit into your lifestyle if you were so involved in healthcare?
Well, it pulled me back from my job. And I started to look and say, what am I doing with my life? Is this what I want to really do? And how could I be a better instrument to serve other people? And I realized that by me taking care of myself, meditating, pranayama, eating well, all the things, that I could serve better. And that's really what the path that I took was. You did all the practices so you could serve people, have the energy to serve people. And that I realized that when I was there then in the clinic, which I quit not long after that, but when I was there, I was totally present with someone. I wasn't worried about my back or thinking how tired I was or when am I going to get home. I was really present. And that's what yoga helped me to do. Just become present with the moment and who was in front of me instead of thinking of the next thing I was going to do or the next thing I was going to do. So see, I think one of the things that people don't understand about yoga, it's not compartmentalized. It's a total. It's a complete way of living your life. It's a lifestyle. And when that realization came to me, it was a whole other world. And I saw the results of it and then got more and more involved in it. And still am today. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yes.
It's a beautiful it's a beautiful buffet of offerings that you're sharing too, because you're out teaching,
Yeah.
you're in your community, and you've also been an author. And we'll get back to some of those flowers that have resulted from this propagation.
Yes.
What came to mind also, and I'm actually on a break from a caregiver conference today, and one of our team is covering. And the caregiver conference is something that this show is really about. It's about
Mhm.
self care, caring for
Yeah.
others, building community in that regard.
Yes.
And I just happened before leaving there, really a half hour ago, I came across someone who was familiar with our organization, uh, and she was curious to meet us today. And it was fascinating because she said, I'm leaving my job, and this
Mhm.
looks to be a mid 20s individual, to follow my path as a yoga teacher. I'm teaching in a Section 8 housing in an
Mhm.
adjacent town in Cary. It's actually an area we're looking to grow into. And I was mildly, but not shocked, amazed of someone shutting it down, leaving
Mhm.
the full time routine.
Yep.
But she has a husband who is supporting her and who could see that she was pretty miserable and
Mhm.
unhappy
Yeah.
in her career and aglow as a yoga teacher. So for you, were you able to negotiate the economics of living at that time when you left what could have been a good paying job to follow your passion?
I'm laughing because I wished I had a husband to support me at the time, but that wasn't an option at that moment. So I sort of went the other way. I went to what I would call a de-economic solution. And that was I became a monk.
Mm-hmm.
So suddenly I didn't need any money because I was being taken care of by the ashram. And then after a relatively short time, I started doing service that I actually was bringing in money, but I wasn't getting it personally.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think there has to be a, a difference between doing your service for money and doing your service not for money. It's the attitude of service. It's not
Mm-hmm.
whether you're getting paid or not for it. And I think when we can take the money issue away from it, at least a little bit, at least temporarily, and think, what do I really want to do? And then adjust your lifestyle to what you want to do instead of adjust what you want to do to your lifestyle. So, if you want a lot of things, and then you need to work a job that pays you enough to get those things. But if you want to be a more of a public servant, like as I think yoga teacher, that's how I think of a yoga teacher, that they're there to serve and then people appreciate it and give them something for it. Then you have to adjust your lifestyle according to that, make it more simple if you need to. But really, I think the healthiest way to live is to follow our passion and follow really what we want to do. Otherwise, all the things around you are meaningless. And I think we're seeing that today. People have so much, or some people have so much, and some people have very little.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't necessarily think that happiness is gauged on that. So it's really a choice. What do you want to do? But in my case, I went into the monastery, and that's how I lived. We got $10 a month for um, allowance, and that was also shampoo and anything else, face cream or whatever else you wanted to get. But there was a simplicity in it, an ease in it. And I really appreciate having lived like that because I know that I can live like that again if I need to.
Right.
But I think the main thing is for me and who when I'm teaching also is to not compromise who you are for money. I think that's an important aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you
Fascinating.
can do your regular job in who you are, that's great. But if you can't, you have to really see what's the most important thing to me. Yeah.
Mm. Well, viewers and listeners, if you are facing some major transition or sort of a question of conscience of are you on the right path, then this is the show to call into for Nischala Devi, Computers 2K Voice on Skype. 919-518-9773 by phone. We're going to move forward with our first pearl of wisdom because they're so lovely. And we might as well start learning sooner rather than later. So we're going to invite Amnon to share the first pearl, and then we'll explore it a little further.
Take in a few deep breaths. Let them out slowly. Now begin to observe a place on you that may be painful or some discomfort. Go to that place. And observe it. Does it have a color? A sound? A feeling? Can you bring a color in that soothes it? For instance, if it's inflamed, perhaps a light blue, and just bathe it with that light blue color. Or if you'd like to use a sound, try the sound of Om Shanti, or just a healing hum. And notice that place. Focus on it. And perhaps the pain, the discomfort will begin to lessen. And each time that you do it, it lessens a little bit more. You can use this practice many times during the day to bring comfort to a place, perhaps, that is not as comfortable as you would like it to be. And close your eyes and be still for just a moment, noticing, sending healing energy.
I'm feeling better already, and I didn't have anything noticeable to start, or at least in my consciousness that I noticed. So viewers and listeners, we moved into a pearl of wisdom because some of the intention of the show is to highlight imagery for healing. And that can be challenging just to imagine anything, let alone to stay focused on it. Could you share, Nischala, how this path evolved for you? When did this aspect start to propagate?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, the fact that I was in Western medicine and then got so involved in yoga. So what happens, I began to, first I discarded Western medicine or medicine completely. I said, I don't want to have anything to do with the physical body anymore. I want to be more in the etheric. And I spent a little time doing that, some time. And then I realized that, wait a minute, I don't have to throw this out to have this. So I began to mesh them together, weave them together, and realized that whatever happened in medicine, we could bring in some of these practices and work with them. Now, today, people are probably saying, yeah, well, of course. But you have to remember, when I was doing this, this was unheard of at the time. Nobody was doing this. And people thought I was a little bit strange. Let's put it like that. And then what I started to do is work with people on an individual basis. We had actually one of the first holistic clinics in the United States was at our ashram in Connecticut. And so I started to sort of experiment with people. People would come in with hypertension and the medication wouldn't be working. And I think, well, what's going on here? Something is happening. So I would just put them in a little bit of a comfortable position lying down, and I'd start to speak to them. Can you imagine that you're relaxed on your summer vacation, and that the sun, and I'd paint this whole picture, and I'd notice the blood pressure was going down. I said, wow, something's happening here. I don't know why, but here, this pill, which is giving them many side effects, is not doing the same thing as me suggesting that they're on a boat in the middle of a lake. Mm-hmm. And from there, it started to grow. I started to play with it, because I think that's what imagery is. It's not serious. Mm-hmm. It's something you play with. It's in your imagination, but your imagination is also linked to your intuition. So it's telling you what you need and how to go about getting it. Mm-hmm. And to me, it was a great gift for me, and a gift that I could then share with other people, and have been doing that. So just even that little bit of imagining, because what happens, we get a pain, say it's a pain in our shoulder, and immediately we reach for the ibuprofen or whatever else it is to take it away. Well, there's a reason that pain is there. Pain is a messenger. Let's go in and find out what's going on in that shoulder. What does it look like? Well, it's bright red. Well, what happens if I put a little blue on it? Well, it calmed down. And I have seen it happen. I've seen people's knuckles that were swollen out, just imagining a color on there. We had one woman, she was an artist. So we would pretend we had a little pretend paint box and a pretend paintbrush, and I would paint her knuckles when she came in. And they were bright red and big. And when she left, they had shrunk and the color changed. And I thought, how could this happen? It's just our imagination. But even her rheumatologist said to her, whatever you're doing, keep it up, because your inflammatory rates are going down. Mm. So somehow the mind is so linked with this that imagery is a way to get to that. Yeah, very powerful. Mm.
And when you were a monk and you had service work that you were doing in the community, mm-hmm. were you doing healthcare at that time too?
That was my service. Working at the clinic. And then I got involved with a research project, which became very, very famous. It was called the Lifestyle Heart Trial with Dr. Dean Ornish. And I was the one that developed the yoga portion for the heart disease program. So I was still in healthcare, but a little bit different, more of a research than direct patient care, although I did do patient care. And then at the same time, got involved with starting a landmark program called the Commonwealth Cancer Help Program. And that's still going on today, even, where we took a group of cancer patients out into the wilds of the California coast. And basically, we did a yoga retreat with them. They did a yoga class in the morning, a relaxation at noon, and another yoga class in the evening. Clean food. They had some different sessions where they talked about how they felt, etc. And it was a week to just pull back. It wasn't research. It was just a time for people to be able to think about what they wanted to do next in their treatment process. So those two programs came together pretty much almost the same time. And that catapulted me back into medicine again, where I had pulled back a little bit from it. But they were both very, very important programs, I think, and showed the people, the public, that yoga can really work, and also showed the medical community that yoga could reverse cardiovascular disease, which is very, even nothing today still can do that. No surgery, no medication, only lifestyle practice. Yeah.
Yes, and the lifestyle practices seem to be increasing in terms of negative practices over time, because even just sitting is considered the new smoking.
Yes.
So there's even a vascular component to doing nothing that is weakening our society.
Well, I just heard an alarming statistic yesterday. I don't know, it was just published in the New England Journal of Medicine. that 79.4 million people in the United States are considered obese. 79.4 million people. So what that says to me is we are not feeding ourselves with what we really need, and we're trying to feed ourselves with food that's not good for us. I think maybe if more people took a little bit of time to be quiet each day, I won't even call it meditation, just be quiet, or take that walk that you're talking about, quietly, not having a lot going on with it. Maybe we wouldn't eat as much. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But that was an alarming statistic. And of course, it's linked directly to cancer, cardiovascular disease, diabetes. And even if we don't live as long, at least let's live well while we're here.
Absolutely.
I think that's the most important thing. And a lot of people are not feeling well. And you can see that by looking at them. So I think yoga is in the right place at the right time to help people.
Well, it's melding with other Western types of research to validate it.
Yes.
But even when I'm at this caregiver conference this morning, and there's people from all realms of life here because they all have family, and some are dealing with their own disorders, that there's still so much mystique about yoga, and even saying yoga can create some dissonance without understanding because they don't know.
Right.
And it's just been fascinating to try to unlabel yoga and to
Right.
call it something else just because it's so substantial in what it is.
Well, we had to do the same thing, Howie, when we first started our research in 1982, and we went to the NIH for a grant. They laughed at us. They said, yoga? You want to do yoga with cardiovascular patients? Ridiculous. They thought it was something you ate with your cereal in the morning. They didn't even know what it was. And they laughed us out. So we had to do all this by ourselves. But that's why we coined the phrase stress management, because people would do stress management, but they wouldn't do yoga. But it's the same thing. We just used a generic name for it. And I think sometimes people get frightened by a foreign name, but they still need to do the practices. Regardless of what you call the practices, they still help you. And I think that's the beauty of it. And then people then gently get accustomed to the strangeness of the words, etc. But, when you talk about the caregivers, I remember I had a very interesting situation. This woman, her husband was so sick. He was pretty much final stages of cancer and in great amount of pain. They had been to our retreat and then they went home, and we kept contact with each other. And she called me one day and she was just hysterical. He was very sick, and I could tell she was really worked up. And she said to me, I don't know what to do. What can I do? Tell me what to do. And I looked at her and I said, go out and take a walk. She said, no, you don't understand. He's so sick. And I said, I understand, but you're not helping him and you're not helping yourself. Go out and take a nice long walk. And she was very confused, and she kind of hung up, and she talked to him about it. And he said, go. And she called me the next day and she said, that was the best advice I ever got. She said, I came back fresh. I came back ready to be with him, ready to love him again, where I was starting to resent it before. Because if we don't take care of ourselves, we can't take care of other people. First, we have to take care of us. And I think that's the caregiver burnout rate is so high because we want to give everything to the person we're taking care of. But who's taking care of us?
Right.
So I totally agree with all these conferences, and to really let people know you have to take care of yourself first. Yes. It's like the airlines tell you that, right? If the mask drops, put it on you first. And it seems
Yes.
selfish. No, I want to take care of my child. But if you pass out, you can't take care of your child. So it's the same kind of thing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was interesting at this conference. One of the representatives of a caregiver organization was experiencing significant fatigue, and that she was assessed and found to have adrenal insufficiency.
Yeah.
And she
Yeah.
wasn't the direct provider, she was a facilitator of care. So
Yeah.
even the relentless pursuit of helping,
Oh, yeah.
even
Oh,
indirectly, is taxing.
you
Uh,
know, we used to have some wealthy donor would give money every year for at Commonweal for the healthcare people to come together, not the patients. So we would all come together. And at that time, and it seems so funny to say it now, but at that time there were probably only like 50 of us in the whole United States that did anything with alternative cancer therapies.
mm,
And we would all come together. And it was such a healing experience for us because we could really talk about us and what you're saying, how it affected us. And I'll never forget this one woman, very, very famous researcher. She was talking one morning and she said, you know, when I walk into a patient's room and they tell me that they're in pain, and I think to myself, oh, yeah, well, I didn't really have a good night's sleep last night. I have a headache now. She said, I go, oops, I haven't taken care of myself enough. And I've never forgotten that because that's what we do. We forget. And somehow we have to be reminded, no, yourself first. And that's where I think the practices really help. You do them in the morning and they bring you back into who you are. And then from there you can walk out. And like you mentioned with the little, what did you call it? That little, I call them um, bites, but you just call that little
pearls.
section pearls. And that's why if you can use those pearls during the day, instead of making that phone call or looking on Facebook, may just take that 1 minute to do it, it can change your whole life because you feel in your own skin, as the French say. You really feel alive and vital. Yeah.
Mm. Well, that's a perfect segue then to move towards our second pearl of wisdom.
Second pearl.
The first one was about inviting color as a possible antidote to an inflamed or painful area. Let's explore our next pearl and see what else we may.
Take in a deep breath and let it out slowly. And on the next breath, begin to expand the belly. And now the upper chest, so that the collarbones rise slightly. Taking in a full, complete, deep breath. And as you take in that breath, feel that you are taking in prana, breath, and also healing energy. And begin to send that healing energy to every cell in the physical body, bringing healing to the whole body. And as you breathe in that healing energy, send that healing energy to the mind. Heal the mind. Bring in that healing energy and send it to the emotions. Healing all the emotions. And continue just washing through the body with this wonderful, healing, soothing energy. Letting go. Taking in. Being still. Feel the healing as it happens.
So we started with the first pearl, which was very localized, and we've moved towards a pearl that can be very generalized. Nischala, can you share a little more about some of the nuances between the two? I know the first had color. How could someone that's unsettled start to digest some of this generalized concept?
I think the second one, being the breath, is something that works on many levels. So let's just take the physical level of breathing. The idea is it's linked to the peripheral nervous system, what we call the sympathetic, parasympathetic. So the sympathetic is like the gas pedal, parasympathetic is like the brake. And the inhalation is linked to the sympathetic. So we take it in, but the exhalation, if we can make it really longer, even almost twice as long as the inhalation, is linked with the parasympathetic system. And what that does, it just calms us right down. Even with children, we do that, right? A child comes in and they're like that. They're all excited or upset about something. We just say, honey, just take a deep breath and let it out really slowly. Okay, now tell mama, what is it? What's the problem? Because you didn't know if it was a major thing or a minor thing. But we still do that because even though our bodies got bigger, we're still children. And we still have the same emotional components, maybe a little bit more refined, maybe yes and so, or not in some people. But the idea that when we let that breath out really slowly, it's almost like a balloon that just goes, we relax. So a few of those a day, it changes everything. And that's why I call them snacks, because you take a little snack. Just because you've had breakfast doesn't mean you don't eat something at 10 o'clock or 10:30. So doing that along the way, and then using that other one, you can combine the two of them together. As you're breathing in and breathing out slowly, you can bring your mind to a place where there might be pain or discomfort. Also, because of the time crunch that I had to do that, I had to just use the physical body. It could be in your life. You could be having a disagreement with a coworker and using this as a time to show in your mind only that you're hugging them. And you're saying, I really like you and I really respect you. Let's let this go. And the more you do it in your mind, the more it manifests energetically. And suddenly you may have a relationship that's nice with that person. So that getting used to using the imagery, I think it's what it is, and not being afraid to project something that you want to happen. Most of the imagery that people do is negative imagery.
Mm-hmm.
The worrying. We worry, right? Something's going to happen. Oh, will I pass this? Will I do good in this? Will I do good in that? And most of the worry never comes to anything. One of my favorite ideas with this is they asked a 95-year-old woman, what was your life like? And she said, my life was filled with many traumas, catastrophes, horrendous events, and some of them actually happened. Right?
Yeah.
Because we make these things and most of the time it never happens. I'm going to miss this flight, or I'm going to do this, or I'm going to do that. And the flight's on time. I do that with myself. I'm running in the airport. I'm thinking, okay, what will I do? And I map out my strategy. Okay, is there a next flight? Can I do this? Can I switch to another airline? And then I'm sitting on the flight and I said, I just wasted all that energy worrying about this. Here I am sitting on the original flight.
Yeah.
But that's what we do. And that's the negative imagery that we do. If we can flip it. Okay.
I guess that was the negative energy surfacing.
I guess that was going. It was being flipped. Yeah, just flip that energy and go for it. So if we can change it into a positive, just think how different our lives will be. Right?
Oh, yes. I
Just
was
go with it, whatever it is, right? It's live, so we just go with it. Yeah,
I was trying to get to the airport from the Accessible Yoga Conference, and all this construction was happening in the
yeah.
Midtown Tunnel.
Oh, yeah,
And I
yeah.
was picturing not making the flight, and I converted over to it'll be all right. It'll be all
Yep,
right.
yeah.
It was. I did get there in time, and the
See,
flight was delayed. So it did. So it was. I didn't even wish for that, and it happened. So that was a whole nother
that's
variable beyond my
that's the
control.
thing. When we're sitting there, why can't we imagine that we're sitting on the flight and we're saying to ourselves, you know what? Everything is fine. I made it on time. Instead of going to the opposite. And it's all a training. It's all a training. You have to, when it goes out, you just have to bring it back. Okay, here I am with it. Let's see, how can we do this positive? I imagine myself sitting on that flight saying, oh, good, everything went well.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how they learn to do fire walking. I don't know if you know that, but
Oh,
when they walk on hot coals, we see this.
right.
What their mind is doing is imagining themselves already on the other side in the cool grass. And that's how they get through that. Because the mind is stronger than the body, and it can make the body do all kinds of things, good and bad.
Mm.
And we have to understand that. People say, oh, don't kiss me because I have a cold. And I say, I'm only going to get that cold if I need to get that cold right now. I'm not going to get it otherwise. And a hug is more important than germs, that love between us. So it's a lot of it is what we think. As we think, so we become, as they say. Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. And then bringing in the heart, bringing in the heart with being compassionate to yourself and others. That's very important.
Mm.
Yeah.
Thank you. We're going to take a little turn here in terms of engaging, as we're going to share our sponsor spot from You Call This Yoga about engaging some of the community that's coming up this week and next week. Amnon. You Call This Yoga presents Yoga Fest Raleigh. Join us each Saturday in June for morning yoga classes in cool and fun locations. Vendors and activities may be on site too. Here is the Well-Fed Garden in West Raleigh, our location on June 17. Yoga Fest Raleigh supports free yoga in Southeast Raleigh at Chavis Park, Raleigh Teen Club, Brentwood Boys and Girls Club, and the Alliance Medical Ministry. Learn more and register today at etouches.com/YFRAL2017. Improve balance with yoga. I was just at the Well-Fed Garden this past week after our first class at Alliance Medical Ministry. Well, what was really fascinating there was Alice, the bee lady, was there, and she was actually doing a beehive opening while I was out playing in the garden. Now, viewers and listeners, if you're planning to come, we're not necessarily going to be right next to the beehive, so you don't have to imagine or fear bees there. We will have a wonderful gong experience with Alicia Nissenfeld, and we actually lowered our registration for this program to $10 a class.
Wow.
All this funding goes to support those programs. Viewers and listeners, even if you can't come, you can make a donation on our You Call This Yoga website. Oh, wait, there's a call coming in now. Hold on. Couldn't have timed that better. Or could we? If it was a real donor, but it was a friend of mine. So sorry about that. But Yoga Fest Raleigh is coming up Saturday mornings, this Saturday from 8 to 9 at the Well-Fed Community Garden. There's Low Range. Low Range is also known as the Lone Ranger because she hops over the fence and can straddle poles with the greatest of ease while breathing through her chicken nostril. I'm sure she only worries about hawks and raccoons, but other than that, she's fine.
Oh, okay.
Well, back to the show with Nischala Devi, who has also created some media to educate viewers, listeners, and readers. What are some of the ways that you've been sharing your learnings and teachings?
As the media became more and more available to people, the first thing I actually did was make some CDs, because in our heart trial study, it became very obvious that if we taught people in class and expected them to go home and do it, we had to give them some tools to do that, because people don't remember. And if you don't remember, they say, oh, I'll wait till next week and I'll see if I remember it next week. So I made a CD that they could actually take home and use, called Relax, Move, and Heal. Just a simple in the chair poses, on the floor poses. Now the chair poses have become very popular, but again, then very few people were doing it. So when I did that, it was radical at that point. And a CD on deep relaxation, and one on imagery, because I felt that was very important for people to do, and meditation. And then from there, after I finished the heart study, when I pulled out of it, was finished, I decided to write a book about my experiences using yoga for people with life-threatening diseases. And it was an amazing experience to do that, and to work with a publisher. I'd never done something like that. And still today, people are using it in their classes. It's called The Healing Path of Yoga. And people are using it to help themselves heal. Very simple, with illustrations. Again, in a chair, on the floor for postures, but also adding imagery, breathing practices, everything with it. So that was my, as I call it, my firstborn. And then subsequently, I moved away from medicine a little bit, away from the healing aspect. I just had done a lot of it. And I decided I wanted to get back into another love of mine, which was the scripture reading, and especially the Yoga Sutras. And I felt like they weren't being appreciated for what they were, because of the way a lot of them were written in a little bit archaic way. And it was from a time when things were different than they were now. And because so many, 90 or more % of the yoga students and teachers are women, I decided to write it from a heart-centered woman's perspective. How do I see the sutras in a soft way, taking out a lot of the you have to do this, and taking out a lot of the negatives, taking out the nons and the uns and the things like that. And the students I was working with were encouraging me. So I actually took on that project, which I had no idea what I was taking on. It was such a large project and so mental, but I turned that mental into intuitive. What is this supposed to mean? What does it feel like, instead of taking it literally? And so that was I named that The Secret Power of Yoga, because I felt like this was really the secret power of yoga. It wasn't what we're seeing, but it was really how we lived, how we talked to each other, remembering that we are divine beings. And that has now become one of the main textbooks for teachers' trainings, which my heart is so happy to know that. And I get emails and calls, and people come up to me and say, I never liked the Yoga Sutras until I read The Secret Power. And now it's right beside my bed or right beside my meditation table. And so that was very nice. And then we did an audio book for it, for people who are driving a lot in the car and want to still learn the Yoga Sutras. So that was and then we took it one step further, and for the viewers too, they can go onto our website, abundantwellbeing.com, click on free weekly sutra, and they get a sutra every week in their inbox, which is then a way to learn them and a way to share them if they're yoga teachers, or just use it as a thought for the week. So those things were very important to me, to really get that out to the public and have them remember and know what yoga really is and where it really came from, the Yoga Sutras. Yeah.
Yes, because the sutras are concepts and ways of having guidance, but the languaging is not our original language. So there's already interpretation. And especially there's this gender inequality in the history of yoga versus the current American practice.
The history of the world is gender equality, not just yoga. It's everywhere. And
yes,
actually the inscription that I wrote in the beginning of the book is that this is dedicated to all the women and men who will never even have to wonder if women are also in the Yoga Sutras. Because women were left out for so many years, and now we need to step up, not push anybody away, but be in there and understand it in our way. Mm-hmm. Yoga can be understood in so many different ways. It's not just one way to understand it. So it's another way. It's an offering. When I wrote this, there were about 1,500 translations of the Yoga Sutras, none of them by women. So that was the first one, and it was something that was very important for me to offer people. And now I see that it was something that they were longing for, or as we started out with in the beginning, hungry for.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I saw somewhere on your website some referencing to Yoga Woman. Is that your alter ego 21st century emoji?
Not quite. It was a movie that I was involved in that was put together by a group of wonderful filmmakers from Australia. And they came around and interviewed those of us that have been teaching yoga for a while and our different ways of teaching. So that's what that was, Yoga Woman. And it's still available. People can still get copies of it. It's actually a very nice movie and really gives the span of women in yoga, which, some of the great luminaries like Indra Devi and people like that who really started it, Vanda Scarvelli, some of the women that are not put up in the same way that a lot of the male teachers were. So it's a wonderful movie, and I'm grateful that they did that. I really am. Yeah. And that they included me. Yeah.
But of course.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of the joys of Yoga Woman and her predecessor, we do have one more pearl for teaching to our viewers and listeners. So let's settle in and get ready to breathe.
Begin by placing your hand on your heart and feel the beating of your heart, that organ selflessly giving and pumping blood to the entire body. The heart also takes in and gives out love. Close your eyes and begin to feel the beating of the heart, and imagine each time it beats, it sends out love and light, healing the world. And each time the beat pauses, we draw in love from the world and healing energy from the nature, from people. The heart sustains us. The heart reminds us that love is the greatest healer, both of body and mind, and ultimately, the world.
Well, to be cliched, that was lovely.
Delicious.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was getting more soothed with each word. And there's an art to languaging that you have developed for your style, because it almost didn't, it did, but it didn't matter almost what you were saying at some of these pearls, but how you were saying them, how you were citing whatever you were sharing. And that takes effort and practice and skill. How would you encourage teachers and even practitioners who are not so versed at this to develop these languaging, inner languaging or outer languaging practices?
That's a very interesting question. And as you were talking, I was trying to go back and think, when did I begin to change my languaging? And I realized that I think when one, again, English language is very interesting language. When I say you, I don't mean, it could mean you or you. And so that's why I go back to one sometimes. When one works with people who are in the end stages of life or in a lot of pain, I think that helped me choose words that were soothing rather than insightful. And when I listen to some yoga teachers, and one of the things that aspects that I teach with both yoga of the heart and healing relationships, two trainings that I do, is how you choose your words and how they affect others. That if you have a calm voice and choose words that are soothing, people will calm. If you say things, now for instance, when I hear this in class, they'll be doing a deep relaxation and they'll say, tighten the arm, make it tighter, tighter, tighter. And I go, oh, it's making me more tense. Instead, if you use it in a very calm way, then there'll be more relaxation. And I always laugh at this because people are telling me to tense. Well, I came in there because I was tense. I don't want to tense more. But it's that, and when I say that to people, they go, oh, I never thought of that. So it's really a skill, choosing words. And going back to the secret power of yoga, I agonized over every word that I use, not to have it gender specific, not to have it incite, not to have it blame. I think that's the other thing. We use a lot of words like that. I was teaching a class once at one of these conferences, big conference, and they had only those closable walls, those sliding walls that they put between. And in the next room was someone teaching a class. I was doing a deep relaxation class. So it was very quiet. And she was going, get that leg up there, push that leg up there. And what happened was so fascinating. The people in my group started migrating. I don't even know if they realized they were doing it, away from the divided wall and started coming closer to me. And we were all like nestled together because the words offended us. They stirred us in a way that we didn't want to be stirred. So I think choosing words that you picked up on that, you're very astute because most people don't. The words that you use it means so much when you're doing, especially when you're doing practices with someone, I always tell the students, especially since I'm teaching them how to work with cardiac patients, never use words like chest openers, because these people already had their chest open. But it's just bringing our awareness to it. And I think when we slow down, we hear words more that we're using and saying, how did that sound? Did that sound soothing or did it sound ruffling? And so I try to do that whenever I can, and in my everyday speech too. How does it sound? Yeah.
I was at a memorial service last night, which is called a Shiva, and
Mm-hmm.
there it's really about supporting those that are in mourning,
Yes.
and there I think the two important muscles of love are the upper and lower lip, and to just listen without having to speak, because
Absolutely.
often we may not say what is right
Exactly.
for the recipient. It may feel right for us because we feel compelled to speak, when
Yes.
really that's not the only mode of languaging. As we've appreciated, there's imaging, there's noticing feelings, there's just being in the space and being present, which
Yeah.
can have great therapeutic value.
I think you found one of the key components to compassion, to just be with the person in pain. That's what compassion means, to be with the person in pain, with, not to be the person, not to try to take it away, not try to change it. And that's very powerful, to just be there. I'm just here. You have another heart that's with you in this, in your pain right now. And that's all people need. They don't need words. And that's what people say. I don't want to go over there because I don't know what to say. I said, don't say anything. Just
Right.
sit there. Just be there. So you're exactly, that's exactly what we need to do. Maybe if we kept this closed more and these open more, everything would be a different world. Yeah. Yeah.
So
And
sweet.
live more from the heart. Don't worry about what you're saying. Worry about what you're feeling. What am I feeling right now? Because that person will feel what you feel. We don't realize that as much. We think we have to express it, but what we feel, very powerful. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, viewers and
Thank you.
listeners, Nischala Devi has, I'm sorry, Nischala Devi has started the conversation, but there's so much more to go. Feel free to reach out to her through her abundantwellbeing.com website, where her resources are there, the books. There's also seminars. She'll be at Yogaville in the near future. Could you share a little bit about that before we sign off?
Yes, thank you. So Yogaville, for those of the people that may not know, is a community in Central Virginia where they serve people teaching yoga, and beautiful place to retreat, etc. And I'll be there in end of July teaching a training, Yoga of the Heart, to teach yoga teachers and health professionals how to work safely and adapt the yoga practices for people with cancer, heart disease, and other life-threatening diseases. It's a 10-day program, and for those of people that are involved with the International Association of Yoga Therapists, it counts as part of their training program, training programs in other schools.
Gotcha.
So they can go on our website or Yogaville's website to find out more information. Thank you.
Sure. Viewers and listeners, if you go to the Abundant Wellbeing website, you can receive your Suture of the Week.
Yes.
Which is similar to just going to services once a week. You have your meditation point and concepts to live by if you choose.
Yes.
Also, coming up next week, we have another wonderful mindful experience with Dr. Richard Miller, who has been very involved with trauma, whether it be in the society or dealing with military-based trauma experiences too. So next week we have Richard Miller.
Great.
We also have Yoga Fest Raleigh coming up the next 2 weekends. If you're in our area, visit youcallthisyoga.org for details and say hey to Lorraine. All right, improve your balance. So thank you, Nischala Devi.
Thank you, Howie, and everybody. Thank you.
It's a
Namaste.
joy, and we look forward to seeing you all soon.
Thank you.
You are tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. If you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it in the archives section at nissancommunications.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter, and like us on Facebook. Sponsored by Telestream's Wirecast software, StreamingGear.com, Carolina Apparel, and DeltaForce.net.